Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Becca and today we are going to be talking about spring preparation for our houseplant. So yes, it is spring. Spring is upon us. I'm so excited. It is starting to become spring where I'm living, which is so exciting. I'm not usually used to celebrating spring so late in the season. I feel like spring usually comes at like the very beginning of March in Tucson where I'm from, and by May we're all sweating outside. So it's definitely an interesting and new experience to, I don't know, not expect super warm temps until like June or July or something like that. So anyway, it's a whole new experience for me, and I've gone through my first actual real plant dormancy season, which has been interesting because I never really experienced plants going through a dormancy because it never actually got that cold in Tucson. I mean, it would get cold, but not as cold as it got here this winter. We had record lows this winter pretty much everywhere. So I'm sure that we're all very relieved to see that the sun is coming back and it's bringing the heat along with it. I asked on Instagram what you guys do to prepare your houseplants for spring, and I got a few comments of people that were like, wait a minute, like there's something that we need to be doing for spring? And yes, there are some things that we need to be doing for spring, and they're not things that you have to do, but they are things that are definitely very helpful to set you up for success. So before we get into the video, I wanted to say a brief thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do for spring prep, remove all of the yellow or dead leaves from your plant. Sometimes I get questions asking, should I cut off yellow leaves when I see them? And in my opinion, I usually leave them. It's not detrimental to the plant whatsoever to have that yellow leaf on the plant. And I usually wait for the plant to like exile the leaf on its own, unless it's a huge eyesore and I'm wanting to clean up the plant, which is what we're talking about right now. So definitely do the work of going around and chopping off leaves when you can, removing dead old growth, and also along with that, propagating off or just full on cutting off the growth on your plants that is from the winter that was either really small, insufficient, or leggy. So this is a process called pruning, and it's really important to do this in gardening and flowers and all of those things, but it's also something that you do with houseplants. The next thing that you need to be doing to prepare your houseplants for spring is cleaning your windows and windowsills. Lots of dust can gather there, and that's a really easy place for pests to hide and gather. And yeah, it just is a really great way to make sure that pests stay at bay and not on your plants. So it's a great time to do some spring cleaning and remove any dust and particles that are just hanging out underneath your plants on the windowsill. Also on that note, I think this is a really great time to take all of the saucers from your plants and wash them with soap and water and let them dry and then return them. A lot of the time saucers are, well, for me at least, made out of terracotta, so they dry really fast, so the process really isn't even that intense. Sometimes I'll even wash them as I'm watering the plant, so I'll just take, instead of just the plant, I'll take the plant and the saucer to the sink and I'll just wash them all together. And I think that's a really great way to keep those areas clean as well, so there isn't extra debris and soil just hanging out on the bottom of the saucer. And then that's also a really great opportunity for you to gather up all of the empty pots that need to be washed and wash them. So maybe go outside, spray them down, get all the excess soil off, and then bring them inside and wash them with soap and water. That just prepares them for whenever the next inhabitant takes their place in the pot, because usually springtime brings a lot of repotting. You know, I'm not really a person that says you can't repot in the winter. I didn't do a ton of repotting in the winter this year, but I know that I'm going to be doing quite a bit in the spring and summer. So getting those pots ready is just a really great way to save time later on and make the house not feel so dirty, because sometimes when those pots are just sitting around, the dirt inside can get really crusty and like flake off if you move the pots around and stuff. And I don't know, it's just nice to have clean pots. And again, speaking of repotting, now is a really great time to stock up on your repotting materials. So buying your soil and all your additives if you're mixing your own soil, or placing an order for the De La Tanks mix if you're buying my mix with Tanks green stuff. It is available in a lot of retailers in person, and I have all of that information on my website that is linked down below. I have a web page completely dedicated to the houseplant mix where we have listed out everywhere that you can buy it. It is available in a lot of retailers in Arizona, as well as Vintage Hill in Missouri where I live, and then I think somewhere on the East Coast is gonna start carrying it. I'm not exactly sure yet. So anyway, lots of places where you can buy it, but also it is being sold online so it can be shipped to you. So make sure that you're stocking up on soil because again, do you wanna make 30 trips to the garden center or do you wanna make like 1 or 2? So stocking up is always a good thing to do, especially when it comes to spring because yeah, you're probably gonna be using a lot of that soil throughout the entire season. Okay, so the garden center has brought up a beautiful thought for me. I'm actually starting an outdoor garden this year and I'm so excited. It's my first time ever doing this. So there's so much that I don't know, so much to learn. And of course I'm doing so much learning on YouTube. There's so many people that I follow here that have been amazing and have so many great videos. I've particularly been watching Garden Answer and Epic Gardening the most, but there's definitely a few like one-off videos from other people that I've been watching. But I did take a class on Skillshare that was so helpful. So like I said earlier, this video is sponsored by Skillshare, and one of the most impactful classes that I took to learn gardening and all the things that I know so far was Gardening 101, a guide for growing and caring for plants by herbalist Geraldine Levine. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creatives and curious people to explore skills and get lost in their creativity. So it's just a really great platform for learning. We all know that I'm a forever learner and I love using this platform for that. So in this course that I mentioned by Geraldine Levine, she talks about seed starting, garden planning, maintaining your garden and harvesting. And she's actually an herbalist, so she has a really fun perspective on all of this and she has a lot of information to share. Definitely thankful for that course and so much more on Skillshare. There's a lot of gardening classes on Skillshare, but that's one of the ones that I've taken so far. So if you are interested in checking out Skillshare to maybe try out some gardening this year or just try out new skills and I don't know, flex your creative muscles, whatever it may be, the first 1,000 people to click the link in my description box below will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium, and then after the trial it's only about $10 a month. So again, thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into spring prep for our houseplants. The most asked question by far was about fertilizing, and I actually had a really long in-depth conversation with Shota from Tank's Green Stuff, which is like a long-standing partnership. That's who I made my soil with. Shota is so knowledgeable about fertilizer and all of those things, so we broke down in that video all the different types of fertilizer that you could use, the frequency of fertilizing, and if I'm remembering correctly, he also threw in some gardening tidbits. Of course, the video was for houseplants, but if you're doing houseplants and gardening, like I think that there's something for both of you, but mostly houseplant driven. So definitely go check that one out. We talk a lot about whether, you know, you should use synthetic or organic fertilizer. I personally, after that conversation, am much more on board with organic fertilizer and have been using the Tank's Supermix Organic Mix fertilizer from Tank's Green Stuff for a very long time. I think like since last year, and I love it. It's just like a topical fertilizer that you sprinkle on the top of your soil, and then eventually it will like come down into the soil, and it's just really awesome. There's a lot of really good stuff in it. There's a lot about fertilizing with houseplants, like way too much for me to talk about it in this video. So that video is a very, very deep dive. So I really suggest that you go look at that. But I want to answer the question because a bunch of people asked, how and when do I start fertilizing? So number one, when to start fertilizing. I am probably going to start fertilizing the next time I water. So all I have to do is look at the measurements provided on the packaging of my fertilizer and sprinkle that correct amount on the topsoil of the plant. And also if you're using, you know, a liquid fertilizer or something like that, just read the bottle and look at the directions that are specifically for houseplants. Usually all-purpose fertilizers will have that as well. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would suggest. Typically when the weather is getting a little bit warmer, it's not going below freezing that much anymore. You can start to wake up your plants and you might even see some growth happening. But the reason that you fertilize is because usually the plants will take up all the nutrients in the soil after a couple of months, and you need to replace that nutrients, and the best way to do that is through fertilizer. So while you're fertilizing your plants, that probably means that you're watering them, so you have a little bit of time at the sink or wherever you water your plants. And so I would really suggest that you take your plants and you look at them and you inspect them really well to see if there are any pest outbreaks that happened over the winter that maybe you didn't know about or have popped up recently. I would really suggest that you utilize a systemic insecticide, which is basically just an insecticide that you water in with the plant so that the plant uptakes that, I guess, insecticide. And when a bug bites into the plant, they're essentially poisoned, you know what I mean? They're not super effective for current outbreaks, but they are definitely helpful in ensuring that future outbreaks don't happen, or they happen a lot less. I have a favorite insecticide from Arbico Organics. I will have it on the screen so that you can see it. It is organic, so there aren't any chemicals in it, and they use obviously all natural materials, and it has been super, super effective for me. So I'm a person who really enjoys putting my plants outside, and I feel like that just makes them grow exponentially faster. And I know that it's not a practice that everybody has, but I think that it is just so good for your plants, and it just like clears up space inside of your house, because in the winter time, like since I started doing this, the winter time, my house feels so cluttered with all of these plants. But then when I can put like probably like a third of them outside, it just totally rocks my world. It's just like so much better. And I don't know what that's gonna look like this year because I don't have like a shaded patio, and I don't even know if we're gonna install one, but we are building a greenhouse, so a lot of my plants are gonna go into the greenhouse, so it won't feel so jam-packed in this room. Like specifically this big girl is gonna go in the greenhouse so that she can be back in her most ideal environment. Our plants are going through a big shift. Yellow leaves might happen more, but just take it as the plant is making room for new growth. And also it might just be telling you that it needs something, so just look at the plant, really spend some time with it and figure out what it needs. Maybe you're underwatering now that the sun is shining longer, which means the plant is drying out faster, which is another thing that I want to talk about. Everything just like leads into the next. It's as if I planned the video, you know? So the next thing that I want you to do is buy or use your water meter, your moisture meter. And if you don't have one and you're comfortable just using your finger, you can do that too. But I personally like to use my moisture meter. I use it a lot in like seasonal changes because that is the time that I notice that my plants suffer the most. And it's not because of them, it's because of me. So I usually get kind of confused about when to start watering plants more frequently, because I let my plants dry out like a lot between waterings. That's just always how I've done it. I really flush my plants pretty much every time I water. It means that I have to water less often, but it also means that I need to water like deeply every time. So I just sometimes have trouble reading the plant's signs when it's really thirsty, and sometimes I lose leaves because of it. So what I do is when I feel like I might need to water a plant, I will take my moisture meter and I'll stick it in the soil, and if it's reading dry, then of course I'll water it. Honestly, I wouldn't rely on the moisture meter alone to do these types of things. Like if the plant is showing signs that it's thirsty and the moisture meter says that it's dry, I mean, you can probably assume that the plant is thirsty. But if the moisture meter is reading that the plant is dry and the plant looks totally fine, I would suggest sticking your finger in there, or maybe sticking your finger up like the bottom of the pot and just like feeling around to see, or like lifting the pot and seeing how light it is. But definitely it is a lot harder to gauge how thirsty a plant is in these seasonal changes, because in the winter time you water a lot less. So that's what we're used to, and the plant is going through that change, and they're going to be needing more water because they're using more energy to create new leaves and grow. So definitely keep on top of that and just be aware that you're going to need to start watering more often, mostly because the sun is out for longer. The heat from the sun is probably also heating up the pot, which makes the soil dry out faster too. But something that we should also be aware of with this is those plants that we have possibly pressed right up against the window, those might experience sunburn now that the sun is going to be burning a little bit hotter and a little bit longer. So if you have moved plants to be very, very close to a window, I would suggest maybe pulling them back a little bit, or at least observing the plants and seeing what happens, because they could totally not have any issues with this in the summertime, but typically plants aren't getting as much light in the wintertime, even when they're pushed up completely against the window, as they would in the summertime pushed up against the window. So definitely be mindful of that change in lighting and just watch those plants, observe them to make sure that they're not taking it badly. Okay, so I kind of like skipped ahead when I was talking about bringing plants outside. I don't really know where I went with that, but I didn't finish my thought, so I'm gonna finish that thought now. So when you're bringing plants outside, it's really important that you acclimate them slowly, because if I have a ficus that I've had inside all winter, possibly even all last year too, it is not used to all of the sun that is outside, right? So the brightest window indoors is still dimmer than outside. because outside the plant is getting like a 360 light. Inside, they're not getting that. They're maybe getting like a 180. If that even. So when you put the plants outside, they're going to be experiencing a lot more light. So what you can do to ease them into this big change is to put them out slowly. So put them out for a few hours during a warm day. And when I say a warm day, I mean anything above like 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I'll have Celsius on the screen. And yeah, that would probably be the lowest temperature that I would start to acclimate my plants outside, because yeah, you don't want to shock them too much, because then they just will die. But I think that it is a really great thing to put your plants outside in the summertime and the springtime. They will explode with growth. Trust me, I've made a video about it before if you want to check that out. Take them out for a few hours and then bring them back in. And certainly do not put them in direct sunlight for a few hours. So if you have a shaded area, that would probably be most ideal, because none of our houseplants are full sun plants, with the exception of ficus. In my opinion, I think that ficus can handle full sun. Not all of them, and also not right away. So they need to be acclimated into that. But my fiddle leaf fig is definitely a full sun plant in my opinion, and it probably will sit in full sun. But that is after I acclimate it quite a bit, because the leaves are so tender right now. And if I was to just throw it out there, it would get a sunburn and it would not be happy with me. So you have to ease into it slowly. So yeah, that would be all of my thoughts on getting your plants ready for spring. I am so excited for you guys. For a lot of people, it is your first spring owning houseplants, or just like your first time like transitioning out of winter owning houseplants. And I want you to know that it can be kind of overwhelming, but also it is so rewarding to see your plants wake up again and start growing, because healthy plants will put out leaves quite often. And as long as you're keeping up with their light requirements and the correct fertilizing, you should really have no shortage of new leaves in your house come a couple of weeks or months. So if you have any additional questions that I did not answer today, please leave them in the comments down below, and I will do my very best to get back to you and possibly inspire new content for the future, because honestly, I'm feeling a little bit uninspired with YouTube videos. Like, obviously I still have like a little bank of ideas, but if you have anything extra that you want to see from me, especially as we go into like the gardening season, because like I said, I am starting a garden, a vegetable garden and a flower garden, herbs, like I'm doing all the things. So I am definitely going to be sharing as much of that as I possibly can. But also if there's anything specific that you want to see as far as gardening or just houseplants in general, please leave that in the comment box as well. That really helps me plan future content, because April is coming up quickly and I need some help. So thank you guys so much for helping me with that. And I hope that you found this video helpful, and pass it along to a friend who might be experiencing their first houseplant spring, or maybe they're confused, feeling overwhelmed, whatever. Yeah, I'm really excited to see all of your plants this spring put out new growth, and yeah, I'm excited to see my plants put out some new growth too. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.